Welcome and thank you for joining us today for Connect Real-Time Business Impact with Observability and AI. My name is Raleigh Gould and I'll be moderating today's event. Our featured speakers are Parker Hathcock, Research Director at Enterprise Management Associates, Matt Gibeat, Regional Director, Solutions Engineering at Dynatrace, and Therese Pate, CTO, Enterprise Transformation Platforms at DXC. Before I hand it over to today's speakers, I wanted to encourage you to log your questions anytime throughout the course of the presentation using the Q&A functionality. Questions not answered during the Q&A portion will be forwarded on to the speakers. And now I'd like to go ahead and turn things over to our first featured speaker, Parker Hathcock. Parker, take it away.
Hello, everyone. I'm Parker Hathcock. As was mentioned, I'm a research director at Enterprise Management Associates, and I cover an area that covers service ops. This is a big area that includes IT and business stakeholders across IT service management, IT operations management, IT asset management, SRE, site reliability engineering, and enterprise service management, which crosses into HR and other areas of the business. It crosses a lot of silos. And it's a very dynamic area that's been changing a lot for years. Recently, it's changed an awful lot. Just this last year, I completed a survey that was called Redefining Modern Service Management, Service Ops, AI, and the Rise of AI-Powered Services. I talked to more than 200 different service ops people, operations professionals, and business people who I asked about, how are you doing things now? How are things going? And the responses highlighted a number of challenges that underscore the need for diverse teams to collaborate using accurate data, to implement artificial intelligence and automation efficiently and effectively. Some of my top observations included that, a lot of digital business, and every business these days is a digital business, must make critical decisions in real time. However, all of these teams that they have, a lot of them are reactive and overwhelmed by data with very little insight into actual business impact of what they're doing. Traditional metrics they don't often show what matters most. They often just relate to certain silos, whether they're IT or business. They don't talk about who's impacted or what the impact actually is. So today we're going to take on a very important series of questions. We're going to go through what's needed to meet these challenges and how you can adapt to be ready for the future. We're basically going to talk about how business processes can go back to IT technologies and also technology processes and roles so that people can get a whole picture and use AI as wisely as possible. We're going to start with aligning IT operations and business teams around shared outcome-driven insights. How do you do that? And then how do you get real-time visibility into customer journeys and revenue impacting transactions? Third, how do you prioritize issues based on business impact, not just technical severity? And then we'll figure out how to use AI and intelligent agents to anticipate problems and guide action. So let's start here. So why is the alignment between IT operations and business teams so difficult, even with better data and tools? I mean, it's a very tricky proposition because there are, think about it, when you go to order something on Amazon or whatever, there are many different applications that are taking place. There are lots of different tools people are using to deliver that service, lots of people, lots of processes. How on earth does that happen? It's very complicated. In the survey that I conducted, I found a lot of answers that point to the complexity. I had all of the survey respondents answer an open-ended question. If you could change or improve one thing about your current IT service or operations environment, what would it be? And although I got many different answers, you could really distill it down to this one here, where it says, I would improve the visibility and integration between our IT service desk and IT ops teams. They talked about how they need visibility that's clear across business stakeholders as well, across everybody in the organization, so they could all be on the same team using the same metrics. That's because silos are disappearing. 55% of the respondents in our report said that they're moving to a cross-functional team approach. That's across all the silos in an organization, and they're organized to align with business services. The goal, again, is to deliver the optimum experience for everyone in the business. So we're going to see how we can do this. How do organizations improve integration between their service delivery tools? How can you build more real-time visibility? How can you increase automation, bridge siloed systems and data? And how can you increase enterprise service management adoption across departments? This is the union of IT service activities and things, like I said, like HR and other activities. So what we found in our survey, again, is that operational and IT alignment is a huge area that requires a lot of work here. when we ask which factors are most important to unify services and operations, cross-functional processes and workflows are important. But that's a lot. That's a big demand. That's 63% here. But if you look at the others, you see that it's very similar. Collaboration is what they're wrestling with, and I think it has to do with not just workflows, not just data, but observability, visibility. We also ask which changes are most important to support effectiveness of service ops. Workflows again took the lead, but it's real-time discovery, dependency mapping, and CMDB, as well as visibility and organizational changes. So it's a combination of people and technology and really visibility that people are looking for to get that collaboration to work. 58% of our respondents reported that decisions about service and operations platforms are often made jointly between combined teams. Panelists reported that 66% of DevOps teams and 63% of SRE teams work both with IT services and IT ops. Now those are just within the IT teams. Obviously, they all report to the C-level folks, and the business leaders are the ones who are doing the measuring and calling people to task. So that's extremely important as well. So how can teams go from everything is critical to focus on what truly threatens customer experience and revenue? How do they sort through all of this data that they've got? It's a combination of many things. It's the profusion of data that people have today, but also the relevance, the context of that data that people need to know to get the right priorities, to get what actually affects customer experience. So let's see what we've found in our survey. The obstacles here, again, point out what the people that we surveyed found in the way. Legacy systems topping the list, resources, budget and headcount, data access and accuracy. And you see the other ones here. There are many, many problems. And of course, the basis of all this is that everybody's working together to try to get an answer, to try to get the direction. Where are they going? How is this working? And this is just some of the complications that people have to face. There are a lot of them, both technical and operational, and also just within processes. But it's fascinating to see this. But let's talk about, I'll introduce Therese, and Matt will now talk about how organizations successfully overcome these challenges. What tools do we have today to help overcome this stuff, and where do you start, right?
Thank you. So we're going to talk a little bit about how DXC has done this with Dynatrace. So it's interesting as you talked, right? It always comes down to people, process, and technology. One does not do it without the other. And I can attest to that. So we as an MSP, right, use Dynatrace actually in two different ways: to deliver services to our customers and internally within DXC to run our own businesses. So we started our journey off with looking at the IT pieces, which you've alluded to, right? But those within silos aren't going to bring you the full value. So we then, increased that to include more of the application space and be able to give people context to what is happening, right? And then we've matured along the way really fast over the last year or so in what we can do and what we cannot do. We've integrated that. We talked about the data, right? So the data and tech debt, we've all pushed it down the road, is something that this world of AI points out really quickly. So what we've done is we've integrated Dynatrace and used the data from Dynatrace to both validate and make sure that we have good data within our CMDBs and that we have context to whatever's happening. So the business knows what's going on as well as IT. So very synonymous for what you've just explained. Internally within DXC, generally, as a general rule, we implement within our own environment before we do with our customers, right? So we can prove it out. We learn any of the gotchas along the way so that we can help our customers through that. So internally, we implemented Dynatrace specifically around it and how do you focus, right? Because it's really easy to have so much information, and those of us with the little attention deficit issues, right, can be distracted really quick. But what we did was we focused on a few of our business processes or our apps that we cared about most. And internally, it was specifically around our own website, right? We wanted to understand, right, how are people engaging with it? How do they work with it? And so we found out a few interesting things. One was we found that we get the most hits on a Tuesday, Don't know why. So if we're going to post positions, many times we'll do it for Tuesday because we know that's when we're going to have the most traction. We also discovered a few delays along the line, right? Where are some things dropping so that we were able to then trace it back and understand the root cause of that and resolve that. So when we talk about the business process or the end to end, there might be a couple of systems underneath, but this is really showing us where it goes instead of, the old days of where you'd have IT on the phone and applications on the phone, and you'd all be locked in a room trying to figure out what changed, right? Why did something
Mhm.
degrade? Why is something happening now? So Dynatrace really helps with that. So if we go to the next slide, um, really the risks of implementing this, and we've done this now with hundreds of customers transparently, but it is, why don't they work, right? What are your risks? So I think the risks are exactly what you've explained. You're implementing in a silo. You get too caught up in implementation and looking at just the applications and
Mhm.
not giving it the context of the full business process. And you end up in firefighting mode, right? In these silos. And that's not where the value is. The value is when you're bringing it at that higher level and looking at things from end to end. And in implementing it within our own environment, I think it's key that you have leadership buy-in. People understand what you're doing. You can't just do it in the silo of IT. IT might be the folks that are implementing it and doing the work, but you're doing the work on behalf of the business, right?
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
really bringing that together is where you're going to get the most value. And creating common language. It's interesting enough, I tend to be a technologist, right? So I live with all the technical words all day long, but I'll turn around and explain what I think to me is, we'll call it English to someone in the business, and
Mhm.
they'll just look at you and go, huh? So creating the common words, understanding their language versus your language, the same word can have different meanings, is really important as well. But let me turn it over to Matt, who can talk a little more about the in-depth of how Dynatrace helps with that.
Sure. Thank you so much, Therese. So you heard the survey. You heard Parker talk about that the biggest challenge is that is really connecting that IT with the business data. You just heard Therese talk about how it's actually done in real life, how DXC does it for themselves and how DXC does it for the customers. So let's talk a little bit about the technology and what it actually takes to get there. Really, when you look at Dynatrace and what Dynatrace is, and for folks that maybe are hearing about the Dynatrace platform for the first time, Dynatrace is an observability platform that I like to call the goldmine of data. We have all the data from our customers' environment. We have performance telemetry, we have business KPIs, we have infrastructure data, we have user performance, we have user experience, all kinds of different data. Now, data is not enough. In order to be able to answer any business questions and actually help to bridge the gap between the IT and the business, the data has to be unified. The data has to be in context of each other. So when you see what you see on this slide are really the three game changers that Dynatrace brings into the industry in our unified platform to be able to answer these business questions and really bridge that gap. The first one is what we call Grail, which is our unified data lakehouse. It allows us to marry all of the metrics, all of the logs, all of the incidents together. So when we report to our customers, when our customers interact with the platform, they know the chain of events in their environment. Then they know how the IT components, how the infrastructure, how the application actually supports, and in some cases, negatively or positively impacts business KPIs and impacts business processes. On top of our unified data lakehouse, which is the backend of our platform, we have what we call real-time dependency graph. And that is absolutely key. Because what the real-time dependency graph allows us to do, it allows us to now use that data in context to understand the chain of events in your environment. So in the example that Teresa was talking about, when a user comes in on a website, and when the website is not performing well, when the website is loading slower, you're probably wondering, well, what's happening to the user? So you're able to now understand what's happening with the user, how the user is interacting with the website. But because of the real-time dependency graph, you're also able to understand why the performance of the website, why the performance of the application is not what it should be for that user. So really leveraging Smartscape in here and providing that visibility in real time, taking that unified Data lakehouse and overlaying that with real-time dependency graph allows us to use that rich context of this data to answer these business questions. And last but not least, it wouldn't be a good webinar these days if we didn't talk about AI, right? So you have to throw AI in the mix. Dynatrace is an AI-powered observability platform. That means that at the core of our platform, we have what we call Dynatrace Intelligence that consists of a few different agents. And what these agents are helping our customers with is not just essentially display data or make sense of the data, but they're actually providing tangible answers around the performance of our customers' environments and the impact that the environment has on the business KPIs. So let's jump into the next slide. Really the underlying technology in here and what the technology allows us to do in here, it really helps us bridge the three biggest gaps that we see between IT performance and the business outcomes. The first one is the business KPIs really lack real-time operation visibility. So what does that really mean? That means that we are very good these days about doing post-mortem analysis. A lot of customers are very good querying data from a database and understand that an outage happened yesterday and that was an impact. But very many organizations these days miss that real-time impact. So when something is happening right now, is my business KPI impacted? Is the customer impacted? This is what Dynatrace helps you understand in real time. This is the first gap that we bridge in here. The second gap that we bridge is the fact that technology incidents lack business context. Let me give you an example. Let's say that you have a high CPU on one of your servers. Or let's say that you have a slowdown on one of your cloud native services. The first question I will ask you is, so what? Is there a customer impact? If a CPU is high or one of the services is slow, does it actually impact my customer logging into on a DXC website to understand if there's any new job postings? If without that context, just IT incidents are useless because we're not in a business of wasting time chasing incidents that don't actually impact our business KPIs. So that gap is bridging here by Dynatrace, and we are able to tell you what is happening in your environment and whether it is actually impacting your customers, whether it is actually impacting your business KPIs. And last but not least, the third gap that we have in here, IT and business operate on different data. As much as I would love to say that it's 2026 and we're all just beautifully collaborating across every single digital organization that we work with, unfortunately, that's not the case. And there's many different examples I can give you, but I think the biggest one is that exact in here, different data. Too often I see IT rely on a different tool and a different data set than the business and the data that they rely on to make business decisions. And if you look at the different data sets, if you look at the different data, if you look at the different tools, it'll be very hard to make an organizational decision to drive efficiency, both on the IT side that will actually impact the business. And this is where Dynatrace bridges the gap. It provides that single pane of glass where you're able to understand how your IT environment is performing and what's the impact of their environment on the business KPIs. So if we jump into the next slide. Let's talk about now. Let's look actually under the hood a little bit. So how Dynatrace marries that, right? I told you we solve these three big challenges. It all starts though with the IT systems. You will first instrument your IT systems, your workloads, your infrastructure with Dynatrace, and that will allow us to understand what is the performance of your environment. From that, we will actually then start deriving what we call business metrics. So we'll actually start looking at logs and metrics and traces. And from there, instead of just looking at performance, we'll understand what are the business metrics that will allow us to tell you the full story about your business KPIs, about your organization. And once we have those business metrics, we'll then be able to actively in real time understand what are the business outcomes for your organization and how the IT is supporting those business outcomes. So when something happens in the backend of your environment, we'll be able to now see if the business metric is impacted. If the business metric is impacted, how does it actually impact the business process? Does it impact it negatively or does it impact positively? And last but not least, we can also use it to drive efficiency. So you can also reverse this graph in here. When you want to accomplish a specific business outcome, you can now look at the second layer, which is the business metric that you will use to evaluate that business outcome, which will then help you design a reliable infrastructure, a reliable application workload, because you know what you need to do in order to achieve that business outcome in order to get there. So with that said, let's jump into the last slide in here for me for a little bit. And actually, let's take a look how one of our customers did it. Aeropuerti di Roma. Really, what we're talking about in here is and one of the busiest airports in Europe, probably one of the busiest airports around the world, right? Especially during summer, everybody wants to go to Rome, see Colosseum, and really experience that Roman life. Look what this customer did in here with Dynatrace. What they were able to do is not only just lower their MTTR, right? Those are very technical metrics, but look at the actual Dynatrace impact. They were able to identify the key business processes that they use to evaluate whether they are actually providing good service for their customers. The first thing in here, I think, is very, very relevant to all of us. Nobody likes to stand at the airport in the line, right? When you have to stand in that line, go through security, you're wasting time, you're getting nervous, you're gonna miss your flight. With Dynatrace, they're actually able to understand how their IT stack can be improved to lower the amount of time that people stand in that line. So look at that. They were able to achieve a 3 minute time to process 90% of their travelers through security. That's even faster than what we today with TSA and Clear. So I think all the airports could really learn from Aeroporti di Roma. And I'm not going to go through all of them, but I want to talk about the 99% punctuality. Think about it from this perspective. If any of their business processes, if any of their business applications doesn't work, the planes cannot take off. The planes cannot take off. Your plans get impacted, my plans get impacted, people miss meetings, people miss their loved ones, nobody's happy. So they really identified that as one of their key business critical processes that they need to understand how to properly support from an IT perspective. And this is what Dynatrace helped them with. Understanding how their stack is designed, understanding how it's performing, and what's the actual impact of their IT stack on the business. That allowed them to focus on the things that are not going well, that allowed them to prioritize the issues that are actually impacting the business rather than focusing on things that have nothing to do with the customer experience and with the impact of the customer experience. So with that said, I'll pass it back to Parker.
Okay, thank you, thank you. Well, so that's very interesting. So Aeropuerto de Roma is a very complex. Everybody who's been to an airport knows how complex that is. Why do so many organizations still struggle to see this end-to-end customer journey and the revenue impacting transactions in real time? Why do they get hidden in the technical severity of issues? All the IT people. Well, again, my research has shown a lot of interesting results from that. Trying to prioritize issues from an IT standpoint, from the IT people that I talked to, said that they're looking to AI to help them do that. They want to reduce MTTR, they want to reduce major incidents, but again, they're looking to AI and AI ops to help with that. Observability is a huge part of that. They want to reduce costs. They want to do all these things, but again, they're looking to AI to be the solution for this. But how far have they gone with AI? Well, most of them said that they were strategic early. Their strategic established was a close second, but they're strategic early. So a lot of organizations are using AI to try to get where they need to be, but they're not quite there. It's a priority in most organizations, but it's not quite there yet. So what does this look like in action? How does this really work? Where are we now? We're like in the middle of a transition, I think, between actually using AI and getting the full benefit. How does that work?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, as we mentioned, AI has to be part of the conversation, right? But as much as we make fun of it, it can simplify things significantly for us, right? But what's very important when you start instrumenting or implementing AI and using it to automate things and using it to derive analysis for you, you have to start with the end goal in mind. And you also have to provide it a good data. So this is a perfect example in here, and I absolutely love what we say on the slide in here. From processes visibility to issue prioritization. That is key. And what we really mean by that is your process visibility is actually now understanding not just an IT transaction, but understanding the whole business process end to end. So let's just hone in on the business process of Aeroporti di Roma once again. The business process that they identified is people standing in line. So the first thing that you have to do is you have to understand how many different applications is part of that process. Well, we have the application that the TSA uses, we have the application in the kiosks, we have the application that the passengers are using during the check-in. We then have the application that they're using to scan whether there's nothing bad in your bag, whether you forgot to, maybe pour your water out. So many different applications. So you have to identify the stack. You identify the stack, you identify the business process, you identify the IT entities, and from there, you're able to start deriving the business process. Once you're able to derive the business process, now the investigation part can start. And this is where the AI, as you see through the rest of the conversation here today, this is where the AI plugs in. The AI plugs in into the investigative part. Because like I said, with the goldmine of data that Dynatrace provides, there's just no way, as much as we like to have human in the loop, there's just no way that a person or even a team of people would be able to do the analysis as efficiently, as robustly as AI will do for us when it comes to investigating the efficiency of those business flows. So let's jump into the next slide and look at an actual real example. I use the Aeroporti di Roma in here, but let's actually talk about an end-to-end process in here. For example, for a retail customer, where a retail customer essentially provides services on their website. So a customer like you and me really see the front end of the business process, right? I'm sure everybody spends money on Amazon, right? So you go on Amazon, you click add to cart, and then next thing you do is you're essentially expecting a package to be delivered at your home door. But what you don't see is everything else that's happening through this process. We are in this DEM component, right? The DEM component in here is the digital experience management, digital experience monitoring. So you interact with Amazon, you add things to cart, you check out, you're good to go. But guess what happens on their backend? That order now gets processed and it goes to their ERP system. From their ERP system, it goes to a warehouse where we actually have to ship it, right? From there, they actually log and track what everything is happening using the CRM. And at the end of the day, they use the voice of the customer in here to understand how the process entirely worked. So all of those components in here are part of one business process. And hopefully this is very eye-opening to everybody because I don't think we really realize how complex the business processes really are underneath the hood today. And this is exactly what you will be able to do with Dynatrace. You will be able to tap into each portion of this process, all the way from the digital perspective, through the warehousing APIs, through the shipping APIs, plug into a CRM, collect the voice of the customer feedback to really now report to that retailer, or in the scenario of Aeropuerto di Roma, really report to the airport the efficiency of the business process. Because once again, we will be able to collect data from every single portion of the stack that supports that IT process. From there, we'll be able to derive those business metrics, and from there, we'll be able to derive the business outcomes that those business metrics are supporting or negating. So that's it. I'll pass it to Therese.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to take you on to another use case that we worked with. We worked with a very large bank. And the process that they wanted to focus on was their digital account opening, right? So they had an experience where end users were opening their accounts, but they were seeing a lot of drop-offs, non-completions. They weren't going through. And so they wanted to understand why. So we did exactly as Matt described. I really liked that previous slide. We went and sat with the business to understand from the time that the person enters the information, all of the processes, all of the applications, the background checks, the what have you, it takes until it actually comes to an account created. Once we did that, we set KPIs, right? So how long should this approval or the background check take for each portion of this, which then related to the applications on which they were done. So we could put that whole process together, as Matt explained. Once we did that, then we were better able to understand what was happening where the drop-offs were occurring, where were the problems in the process, resolve that. And as a result, they were able to then increase the rate of digital accounts, which always helps a bank, and decrease the drop-offs, right? So it really impacted, for a bank, that's their prime business. They want bank accounts. And so we were able to go through and do exactly as Matt described, define the KPIs and how it should work, and then tune the whole process and the applications along the way to ensure that it was a seamless experience for the end user and decrease those times. So it was a really powerful use case, and the client was quite pleased.
Okay. That's fantastic. So that lines up again with my research. When I asked the users, the technical people, how are AI and intelligent agents reshaping how organizations anticipate digital experience issues and guide decision making across IT and the business? This depends on observability. This depends on watching those processes at just the stages you just talked about, both of you. But it also involves a lot of people then. Again, at this crossroads where we are, a lot of people are wanting to see into those AI and agentic activities a little bit clearer. And this is what they told me. they said that their organization is pushing for AI everywhere they can, but most of them only enable automated actions with human oversight and approval. They still want that human touch, and this is still coming back from a lot of different research that people are looking for this. So it's not just AI that's going to save the day, but it's observability. It's seeing what's going on and seeing that at a certain level and within a certain context that's so important. So agentic AI is also important here. It's coming into its own now because it's not just AI that gives people advice, but it's AI that takes action. In our survey across all these respondents, they said that AI, most people on the left here, you'll see that AI offers and promises a lot of great things, right? They can get rid of MTTR, that's mean time to resolution. They can reduce the time and effort that it takes to solve problems. And that, of course, leads to a better customer experience. But there are big challenges along with this. They've got to effectively layer human systems and processes. They've got to develop the organization-wide policies and guardrails. They have to overcome things like mistrust and fear and other things that help build out the process, the people, and the technology. And that, again, is where we have, an enormous example here with DXC and Dynatrace. So if you could explain a little further, let's talk about that observability, Matt.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you really think about AI, I think AI introduces a lot of opportunity for every single organization to do things better, to do things faster, to beat their competition. But
Mhm.
what we don't talk enough about, in my opinion, is that AI also introduces a lot more complexity into
Mhm.
many processes. And it's so heavily based today on the input data that you provide to it. I'm sure everybody by now heard the word hallucination or tokenomics. Like those are all new terms that we have in the AI observability world, but they're very important. So as in order for you to actually be able to drive your business forward with AI, you also have to understand how your AI workloads are performing. And here's now where Dynatrace is not only an AI-powered observability platform, and we leverage AI to help you with the root cause analysis, where we use AI to help you with all that data that we capture to make sense of it, but we can also provide you the best of breed observability platform to monitor your AI workloads. So you can now invest in confidence and you are able to understand how your AI workloads are performing. Are your AI workloads actually contributing to the business KPIs that you want to achieve? Is the place where you're spending money the right place to be spending money in order to drive these AI workloads? And we do that through really providing an observability layer to every or observability into every single layer of these AI stacks. So you can see your application, orchestration, agentic layer, model layer, vector DB layer, and infrastructure layer. So really, you can use Dynatrace, an AI-powered observability platform, to cover all of your use cases for all of your AI workloads, for all the way from basic observability to the deep end observability to truly understand whether the way you're investing money, whether the way you're using your AI tooling, and whether the way you're creating your AI workloads is actually the way that is driving your business forward. So with that said, let's take a look at one of my favorite customers of Dynatrace recently, TELUS, because they just do so much cool stuff and they innovate every single day. I literally go on LinkedIn and I see them posting all of the cool things that they're doing with our platform. Now they're tapping into DTCTL. So there's just so many cool scenarios. But the reason I love this example because they specifically embrace the era of agentic AI. And by embracing that and actually using Dynatrace to not only use AI from an observability perspective, but also deploy Dynatrace into their agentic AI workloads, they were able to drive just enormous impact to the business. First of all, they are able to track in real time any revenue impact that the IT issues are causing in their environment. They were able to essentially lower the amount of time that it takes for them to correlate alerts. And instead of doing it in 40 minutes, now they're able to do it in 5 minutes. So think about it. When there's an incident, they're essentially able to come into Dynatrace, and no matter how complex their stack, no matter how many different agentic AI workloads is running their system, they know right away within the first 5 minutes what is happening and how that is actually impacting the business, whether there's any real revenue impact, whether there's anything that they need to be doing right now to act upon it to fix the issue, or maybe they can for now watch it. They don't have to waste time. They can keep focusing on innovation and not troubleshooting issues that aren't actually impacting their business. So I love that specific example in here, but I know Therese has another one that she'll be sharing with you.
Yeah, so your point is it's in a really exciting time. Everybody wants to get the advantages of agentic AI. Um, but yet they're a little afraid of it as well, right? Losing control. So again, in our journey internally, sticking with the mantra that we do it with our own business first, right? We are right now building out those agentic workflows, the agent to agent crossing systems, where it's starting to become more complex. It's not the simple piece of AI anymore that maybe is just predicting even an isolated incident and resolving it. It's more about, an agent communicating with an agent, specifically in Dynatrace. So Dynatrace data is very rich. So we're working with as we implement these, and the business is like, well, yeah, but what if and what if? I go, well, that's okay, because we're going to implement Dynatrace along the way. It's going to help us with the observability to make sure we have no hallucinations, right? To make sure we have nothing that runs off course and causes us any danger. So that's the piece, and you have to bring it all together because you have to give people comfort, right? That what is going to run the same as you or I might do it. And it has all of the guardrails and it has everything in place that it needs. And just on a side note, the other day, we do these sessions where people bring forward the different AI solutions that they've developed. And one developed one using Dynatrace data, which I found quite intriguing. And it was using the data, and you talk about tokens, but it was using the data, right, to understand what was overutilized, what was underutilized, to tune, right, the resources that were being used that is running this end to end. And that itself brought in cost savings. So I thought, it's all about data's great, but you have to have it in an organized, contextual fashion so that you can use it to then better the data. You know, thank heavens we're out of the era of creating the 25 different dashboards, right? To show people the data where they're at. You can use AI now to use the data that you need to achieve the results that you have. So we continue on this journey, but that's where Dynatrace is coming along to give that comfort to the business that we are staying within our own AI guardrails that we've set for ourselves. And then as we go and we implement these for customers, we can show them how we've done it in a safe way that you can monitor it and keep it going along. So it's a very fun and innovative time, and it changes so fast.
That's fantastic. Thank you both for bringing connecting real-time business impact with observability and AI back to reality. I can see all the problems and questions and issues that my panelists have had, and you've shown a really clear vision of how well they can overcome those problems with your technologies and support. Raleigh, I don't know if we have any questions we could ask.
Well, I think Matt has one offer. I think Matt's going to
Oh
close us
yeah.
out with one
Okay. Yeah.
offer.
Sorry.
There
Sorry
you
about
go.
that. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. I
Edit,
mean,
please. Sorry.
it's definitely a very exciting time, and if our conversation was so brief, I can't believe that it basically took us already 40 minutes. That's what happens when you have fun. But if this was interesting to you and you would like to dig in a little bit deeper, we do have a free ebook for you. So just scan the QR code in here, and that ebook talks about the 5 challenge of achieving observability at scale. To achieving observability at scale. So again, check it out. It's got a lot of good nuggets. It really digs in a little bit deeper than what we were able to do today during this webinar in the 40 minutes that we had. But I think it will answer a lot of the questions you have. And hopefully, if you have any other questions, we can answer some of them right now.
Great. Thank you all for that
Mhm.
really insightful information. Let's take a couple of questions before we wrap up. Starting with you, Therese. How does Dynatrace's observability platform add value in the enterprise-wide AI implementations that DXC is running?
So like I said, the biggest barrier that I am finding within internal is getting people comfortable with it. And I think I really just touched on to it, right? So it's about using the data to show people what is happening and being transparent, right? So you have to be transparent with how things work. And I think bringing IT and business is the other critical factor together, right? So you bring them together, you have shared same data, right, Matt? Not different sets of data that
Mhm.
we're both looking after. And that brings the level of comfort. I've watched just working with our own teams over the last month or so, I watched it come from, very concerned to, oh, yeah, this is going to work. This is going to help, right? So it's that journey that you have to go. You have to manage the change along with it and have that visibility and transparency.
Great. Thank you, Therese. Matt, let's wrap up with you. How do teams reconcile increasing data overload with the need to determine and act quickly according to all this data?
Well, I think we can maybe just answer it with one word: AI. No, I don't think that that's a good enough answer. However, I think AI is very important to it. I really think that in order to be able to make sense out of that data is that word that I mentioned a couple times throughout my talk track in here, so you probably caught it already. In order to make sense of that data, you do need two things, in my opinion. First of all, you need that data to be in context of each other, because capturing more and more data, that doesn't mean that you will be able to answer more questions or you'll be able to answer them faster. That's just data overload. So having all that data in context is key because it'll actually tell you the true story of what's happening inside of your business. Now, here's where AI actually makes sense because once the data is in context of each other, you can actually leverage AI to efficiently spend your time and have AI do a lot of the work for you and give you the answers instead of having to dig through that data yourself. So I would say having data in context and then layering that on top with all of the AI capabilities that are ever changing and developing and improving every single day is probably the best plan for success, in my opinion.
Excellent. Thank you all for taking those questions. And I wanted to thank the audience for taking time out of your schedule to join us. Please look out for an email from EMA that will include resources from today's webinar. Thanks again for joining us and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, guys.